I'd like to ask some questions about Chinese headquartered surveillance companies, including HikVision and Dahua. Before I get into the questions, are you familiar, Mr. Kefford, with the developments in the United States and the United Kingdom in the last few days in relation to these companies?
I'm sorry, Senator, could you restate the companies?
HikVision and Dahua.
I'm not, but I might ask Mr. Ablong to join us, Senator.
Thank you. While he's doing that, I have some articles which I will table, some media reports on each of these decisions, which might assist witnesses and other committee members who are interested. But to briefly summarise, the United Kingdom government has banned both HikVision and Dahua from providing surveillance equipment on government buildings. Some individual UK government departments had previously had bans in place, but it now applies to the whole UK government. And that was on the 25th of November. And on the same day in the United States, the Federal Communications Commission said it adopted a new series of rules which exclude a number of high-risk Chinese tech vendors, in particular HikVision and Dahua, from providing services that would threaten national security, particularly on government buildings, but also school authorities, local governments, etc. While that's being circulated, has the Australian government considered a similar move to the UK and the US?
Senator Mark Ablong, Deputy Secretary, Strategic Initiatives. The issues that you raised are known to us. We've been in consultation with colleagues in the UK and the US. At this stage, the government's position around high-risk vendors, particularly in the telecommunications sector, hasn't changed since decisions were made regarding Huawei a number of years ago, but we are keeping the issue under advisement and looking at the rationale that both the United Kingdom and the United States used and the way in which that might have some implications for Australia.
I don't know whether or not the US and UK moves were coordinated or not. It may or may not have been, but it does appear, given that they've announced their decisions on the same day, that it might have been coordinated. In the lead up to their decision, did either the UK government or the US government notify Australia of their plans to do so?
No, Senator.
No. And so Australia didn't have an opportunity, if there was one, to act in concert with them?
We have been in discussion with both the UK and the US for quite some time about those technologies and how they might be applied, but in this specific case, the announcements made by both countries weren't pre-consulted with us.
Okay. So has the government considered whether it might be necessary to do this in Australia as well?
Senator, that matter is still a matter for government to consider.
Let me rephrase. Has the government sought advice from the department about whether Australia should do so as well?
We are providing government with advice, but we haven't been specifically asked for such advice.
Right, so you've been more proactive in saying to the government, if you wanted to take action, these are the issues, or...?
Which we do on a regular basis.
Of course.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Because it seems interesting to me that, the US and UK are our closest security partners. Obviously, they're AUKUS partners, they're Five Eyes partners, they're treaty allies, they're kind of very intimately close to us, and they've made a significant decision in this area, and we have not yet. Is there any reason why we wouldn't follow their lead on this and do the same?
Senator, that's a matter for government. I couldn't comment. All I can say is that the same judgments that were made about high-risk vendors previously would still apply to those technologies. In a number of cases, Australia has done so with respect to particular technologies that we feel are inapplicable in an Australian context. Those have sometimes resulted in mitigation measures. So, for instance, if it's an internet-connected device that we believe should not be connected to the internet, but it still provides a capability, some judgments are made about removing its ability to communicate. In other cases, we've made judgments that the technology should be banned, so we continue to do that and we'll make the appropriate advice to government.
Thank you. You referred to that in the telecommunications sector. In the case of Huawei and ZTE in relation to 5G in 2018, Australia led the world. We're the first to do so, and that was a great Australian achievement, I think, and many other countries have done the same, which backs our judgment. In this case, we haven't taken the lead on that. I'm just interested in understanding why. There's two concerns associated with these companies. One is a kind of a strict security concern and one is a moral concern. The security concern is that these companies are subject to the national security laws of China, which compel them to cooperate with the Chinese government covertly. We may never know if they are asked to provide data that they collect in our societies to the Chinese government and its intelligence agencies. But the moral component is both of these companies have been involved in the surveillance of the Uyghur people in Xinjiang in a way in which I think most Australians would be grossly offended by. Has the department provided the government advice that focus on those two issues?
In respect to the two companies you named, not yet, Senator. If I could draw a distinction between the decisions made around the telecommunications sector and the high-risk vendors in that case, that was very much at the start of Australia's consideration of 5G technologies, and
yes.
Shaping that to begin with was seen as an important measure to allow companies to make the appropriate judgments about where to invest.
Yep.
In these technologies, many of them are in use around the world as a normal course of events. So, to the degree that we will provide government with advice as to what the listings mean in the UK and the US, and to some degree that comes to what that might mean for Australian companies who deal with those companies and deal with the United Kingdom or the United States.
Yep.
We are pulling that advice together and we'll provide that to government in due course.
Thank you. I submitted a question on notice to the department through the Senate, number 574, in relation to the department's use of these services, and the department provided an answer. I don't want to overblow it. It is only one instance, but there is one instance in which the department relies on HikVision, or a building in which, to be completely accurate, a building in which the department is a tenant has a HikVision or Dahua camera. I'm not sure which is which, and that this is the 4 National Circuit building in Barton, and also, the 70 Franklin Street building in Adelaide. So to be clear, in any department-owned or operated facilities other than these two, there are no HikVision or Dahua.
That's my understanding, Senator, yes.
And is that a deliberate policy decision?
Senator, we have sought to make procurement decisions based upon both the value for money proposition involved in that procurement activity, but also conscious of where vendors are and what some of the implications of those technologies might be. We have made deliberate decisions in the past. I can't speak to the specific ones around these technologies
in the case of, just to interrupt, that in the case of these companies, typically their services are cheaper than the alternative, so it wouldn't have been a value for money proposition if the department has decided not to have them. In fact, it would be contrary to that. It would be we're willing to spend more in order to not have them there.
Well, value for money is not just a case of the cheapest option involved.
Indeed, and that's my point. I mean, the department has clearly, in excluding it from every other facility in which it occupies, made some kind of deliberate policy choice here, surely.
Senator, to the degree that we own and control those facilities, yes. To the degree we're a tenant in somebody else's facility, those decisions are made outside of the department's specific control.
Of course,
we may have an input into it, but those decisions are made by the owner or operator of the facility, of which we are just one tenant among many.
I do understand. I'll come back to that issue in a minute. But why then has the department decided to not have these devices in those other locations of which you are in complete control?
Senator, for the same reasons that the US and the UK have looked at these technologies, we remain concerned about those companies and their relationship with the Chinese government.
Okay. I also asked the department whether or not it had visibility of whether any other government departments had these installed, and the department said no, it doesn't collect that information. How would I go about finding out about whether the Department of Agriculture or the Department of Health or any other department would have these facilities? Should I submit an individual quon to all of them, or is there some central repository? Is there someone who's got visibility of this?
Senator, there tends not to be a central repository under the PGPA Act. Each individual department makes the choices it does about where it expends its funds.
And I also asked whether the department had provided advice to other government departments or agencies, and the answer to that was also no. The department doesn't say, guys, don't use HikVision or Dahua, there's a risk here. Does anyone provide that advice?
Not to my knowledge, Senator.
Shouldn't someone? I mean, Home Affairs has made a decision, I think for very good reason, to not have it predominantly at the sites that they operate. But you have expertise in this area and you'd be well informed on these issues. No disrespect to your colleagues at the Department of Agriculture, they might not, and might not have as much sensitivity to these issues. Who is going to tell them if it's not a good idea for us to have it, it might not be a good idea for you to have it either?
That's a very good question, Senator, for which ultimately it would be up to governments to make a decision about how it requires individual portfolios or departments or agencies to make choices. I think in previous sessions have had that discussion around things like the use of TikTok on various departmental devices in various departments and the choices that each individual agency makes about what it bans or what it accepts on its networks. Some of those are based on judgments about the degree of risk involved. Some are made on pure value for money bases. There isn't a central controlling department or agency that is responsible for providing that sort of advice. The Australian Security Intelligence Organisation does provide general advice to all agencies about some of the risks.
Yes, and I might have an opportunity to ask Mike Burgess about that later. But it seems to me that there's a potential gap here, which is that I think we are in agreement that this is a risk and that the department clearly has implemented itself, but I'm concerned that other departments won't have done so. I will seek that information. I have already asked the Department of Finance whether, as part of the rollout of CCTV cameras at electorate offices of members and senators around the country, whether or not they will use either of these and whether or not they already might have installed some of these at electorate offices. I think it would be of great concern to senators and members to know that there was any risks associated with this technology and our constituents who come to meet with us, but I'll pursue that with them. Just coming back to the building at the 4 National Circuit, Barton, which I appreciate you are only a tenant in and don't control, that is a building where the senior executive of Home Affairs Department works from, though, isn't it?
That's correct, Senator.
Yeah, including Mr Pizzullo and all his team.
That's correct, Senator.
It's also across the road from the Attorney General's Department and around a corner from the Office of National Intelligence. Without kind of overdoing it, it is quite really the heart of the policy heart of the national intelligence community in that area, isn't it?
Well, that's your judgment and your word, Senator. You are correct as to which organisations live in that part of National Circuit. Yeah.
So perhaps in light of the US government and the UK government decisions, the next time that the lease comes up for conversation, would the department consider raising this with the ultimate owner and control of the building, whether or not it's appropriate technology to have in the building?
Senator, I think that is a legitimate area for the department to engage in conversations with the leaseholder. It is also dependent upon where those cameras are situated in what they have access to. If it's external, street level, it might be different from cameras inside of the building itself.
Okay.